It seems like every time I catch up with Andrew Middleton from Gosolr, we've got another good reason to start installing solar installations at residences. That's what Gosolr have done. They've democratized access to electricity, access to solar. You don't have to have hundreds of thousands of rands to install. You can do it in a rental basis, as I do, because you just never know what's going to happen in the future with the cost of all of these, all this capital. But anyway, Andrew, today we're going to be talking, I'm going to quiz him on renting versus buying. You know, just in preparation for our discussion today, Andrew, it was a reminder for me, I've been around a while, on when televisions came into South Africa for the first time. I wasn't really in the marketplace at that stage, but I've read a bit about it and met Theo Rutstein, who was a big innovator back then. It was very, very expensive to buy television sets. In fact, most middle-class people could only afford black and white sets. I know we couldn't even afford a black and white set at our home, but my pal down the road, his father was able to, but color was just not even an option. And then along came Teljoy and Theo Rutstein, and they offered the option to rent TVs and brought television into the South African marketplace a lot more rapidly than it would have been otherwise. Are there parallels with what Gosolr is busy with at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely, Alec, and thanks again for having me. I also, by the time I got a TV, I just saw Teljoy as another television company. I didn't realize actually at the time that they had that model, but I think there's a lot of parallels with Gosolr. Solar still is and is seen as a luxury product for a higher income household, and it really should be more accessible. So I'm glad that Teljoy brought TVs in that way, and I think we've certainly been able to scale and bring solar to many households with our solar as a service or rental model.
So you've only really been installing for the last 18 months. Are there any caps to your growth? Because you would have thought from the demand of the South African citizens, given that we have load shedding, there certainly wouldn't be a cap to that opportunity.
We think there's still plenty of market share available. There's just with our current product set, and we've just opened up a new segment of the market with our smaller product. Just with our current product set, there's that has a home in at least 2 million homes in South Africa, and we don't think that there's even a 5% market penetration at this stage. Probably in some of the more wealthy suburbs of South Africa, penetration is probably at 10 to 20%, but there's still plenty of opportunity for us and a lot of the exciting players that are joining. So there's plenty of space, I think.
Smaller product?
Yeah, we've just launched our 3.6 kilowatt product for 1,399. I think it's one of the first in the market, and I think that's going to be a very exciting product for the smaller household, or a single household, or a couple, a retired couple. We've seen very interesting demand for that. So I think we're always going to try and innovate and come up with solutions for the broader South African households.
1,399 per month. Okay. The first time we spoke a few months ago, the product that you were then talking, or that we then spoke about, was 1,740. So how does it differ? How do the two products differ?
Well, you get less solar panels, so you're getting 6 this time around, and you're getting a much smaller inverter. It's a 3.6 versus a 5. So it's still a decent size, but this product is very much an essential load product. So you're going to get the bare essentials, which I think works for a lot of households. So a few plugs, your Wi-Fi, your lights, your TVs. This is not something that you can put your appliances on. Whereas your 5 kilowatt and above, you can run small appliances on.
Okay, so almost like an entry level, you're not going to be boiling any kettles, maybe a very little kettle, but you will be able to. You'll have lights, you'll have internet, you'll have television sets when there is load shedding. Are you seeing that the demand continues to escalate, given that Eskom's load shedding hasn't gotten any better in the last 2 months since we last spoke?
I think it's fairly stable at the moment, Alec. When we last spoke, I think there's definitely been a drop off in demand from the real peaks that was the first half of the year. I think that was also quite unsustainable growth. And I think a lot of the, including ourselves, like a lot of the players in the market, we struggled to keep up. Our wait time did increase substantially over that period. We're very happy now with our service levels and being able to install people within a week. And it's a very stable market at the moment. And it has been showing some signs of ticking up. We're very bullish long term on it. But I think it has been an opportunity for the market to consolidate a little bit and to get the supply chain and the network of installers behind us.
And differentiation, I guess that's always an issue in a new area, that there wouldn't always be reputable players coming into it. Are you being able to differentiate yourself?
I think so. I think our pricing is probably the most competitive in the market, and I think we've been able to do that with the scale. So we've been pushing our scale benefits to our consumers as well. So they get the benefit of our procurement, our investment in technology. So I think that's definitely one of our key differentiators. The biggest differentiator for us is going to be customer service, and for all players that offer a subscription service as opposed to selling the product. We only get our return if the product works and works well through the life of the asset. So I think we've invested heavily in customer service. We invest heavily in technology, software developers, and we've got some exciting developments coming, which I hope I can share in a few months with you, and how we're going to make the product work better and make it as a service. I think the topic for today was really own versus rent. And I think for me, the key question you got to ask is, do you want to buy the asset or do you want to buy a service? Do you need to own it to get the benefits? And we believe fundamentally you don't, but there's definitely pros and cons to both.
Yeah, let's get into that. I did kick it off a little with Teljoy and the way they came into it, but if to get a solar installation, it is a couple of R100,000 that you've got to find somewhere. Either put it on your bond. I see some of the banks are trying to make that an option, or you look at the alternative of renting. Now, some people, I guess, let's make the argument first of all for buying. I know it's difficult for you because it's not your business, but let's make an argument for us.
Sure. Well, I think if you've got excess capital, you've got access to capital as a household, and you will get a return on your investment. So, electricity prices are continuing to go up. So the capital that you commit to your installation, you will get a return. So if you've got excess capital, it is a place to park your capital and to get a return. That's definitely one of the benefits. If you would like to own it and maintain it yourself, and you can make sure that it's installed properly and it works well, then I think that model can work for you. I think we think that households don't have excess capital at the moment in general, and those that do should use that capital for something else, whatever that may be, whether it's a discretionary spend, whether it's an investment spend. The household can't get the same return on the solar equipment that Gosolr and others can, because the scale that we have just gives us a much lower cost of the equipment than the household. So the household pays its cost of funding or its opportunity cost of capital plus the margin up front. But yeah, that I think that's one of the biggest benefits of ownership. Another benefit of ownership, if you've got a business, or you will access some of the tax incentives that are designed for businesses, and there is one for households now for ownership. So that's another benefit of ownership.
Okay, so that's on the ownership side. On the renting side, and again, let's go back to Teljoy. If you'd bought a television in the very early days in South Africa's entry into that market, you would have been pretty unhappy in a couple of years' time because technology had brought down the prices. Moore's Law,
Absolutely.
as we know. Is that playing out now in the solar field?
Absolutely. I mean, technology is getting better and better, and pricing is coming down. I think there's been quite a bit of Moore's Law effect the last 5 to 10 years, in particular on solar panels. I think those are priced very competitively, and inverters are quite competitive. I think the big game-changing technology, we believe, in the next 3 to 5 years is going to be on storage batteries. There's talk of sodium batteries replacing lithium. Lithium was a big breakthrough from lead acid, which is in our cars. So I think there's so much R&D spent around the world. I think if you just look in markets like the East, in Asia, Korea, China, just the investment behind technology, renewable energy technology, and in particular solar and battery storage, it's quite remarkable. And even the US There's huge investment drives driven by Joe Biden and the Inflation Reduction Act to push huge amounts of capital into the industry. So the technology is going to get better and better, and we believe that we'll be at the forefront of that and make sure that our current and future households get the benefit of that, as opposed to investing in technology that may become obsolete in time.
But what happens to your business in that respect? You've made all this investment into, just for example, lithium batteries, and now sodium comes along. Does that make a lot of what you've invested in redundant?
We don't think so, because firstly, it's not going to happen overnight. So we know that lithium batteries have a certain lifespan in any event. I think the value for us is having a happy customer that sees us as an energy provider as opposed to just a renter of equipment. We can use those lithium batteries if we find that there's a case for replacing our lithium batteries early with something like sodium. Then we can do that. Those lithium batteries are still going to have a commercial use or a use somewhere else, and we will take those and repurpose them. And that's something we look at. But we don't think it's going to happen overnight. We think it's going to happen in 5 to 10 years' time, maybe sooner. And that's what we've built in. We've built in assumptions around when we expect to change batteries.
Okay, so the case for renting.
Well, I think the first one I've mentioned is, do you want to service or do you want to own? So I think the hassle factor is big. You can call us 24/7. Things do, need maintenance. Sometimes things don't work like they should, and you need a company to help you through it. And we offer annual maintenance. We will change the components. I think the big thing is that opportunity cost of capital I mentioned, and the alignment of interest. So when you purchase a solar system from an installer that's selling it to you, that company that sold it to you has banked the profit upfront, and you hope it works. So there isn't much incentive, going forward for that company to look after you. Even the best intentioned companies out there, they've made their money. With us, our whole model is premised on you staying happy and staying with us for many, many years. So I think that for me that's why I like it as a customer of Gosolr too. And then we've spoken about the cost of capital piece. We think there's much better uses of households' capital, which is limited and getting more and more limited, than investing in something that's very expensive still, and they don't have the scale benefit that we do.
Yeah, there isn't a lot of extra dosh to go around in the South African economy right now. So allocate it in a way that you can perhaps leverage it even better. The upfront cost is one thing, but the maintenance. Now, you would assume that at some point in time, the batteries are going to die. I don't know how long that is, and maybe you can enlighten us on that. And then with Gosolr, because I'm renting a service from you, if the batteries die, it's your problem, not my problem. You come and replace the battery for me. But if I buy it, I have to work in some kind of a redundancy. How long would that process take?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And I think sometimes households forget about that replacement cycle when they work out their return on capital. Even households that are good at those types of calculations, but may forget that. Look, the batteries we use are high quality. We've got 10-year warranties. They are 10-year warranties, but they are generally linked to cycles. So it depends how often they're cycled. They're designed to cycle a lot. So we expect, that they should last 10 years, but we may decide to replace sooner. And that would just be driven by technology. And if the battery, after 7 years is still good, but it's not as good as what it could be if you replaced it, then we can obviously replace it and use it for someone else. If it's a household that's bought it, they're going to try and sweat that asset as long as they can. But we working on the basis of between 5 and 10 years.
When you say use it for someone else, is there going to be another portion of the market that perhaps would use secondhand equipment? Are you looking at that as well?
Potentially. I mean, that's something that we've considered. There's also a lot of commercial users. I think even Eskom, for instance, is talking about setting up their own battery storage facilities, which makes a lot of sense given to manage their peak demands. So these secondhand batteries that are not necessarily fit for purpose for your household can be aggregated and stored and set up a big battery storage facility. So that's one idea. You can repurpose them for other markets. I think an interesting anecdote that I received recently was the second-hand electric vehicle market for batteries hasn't come into the world just yet. Electric vehicles are still relatively new, and those are 60 kilowatt batteries. And when they reach the end of the life of vehicles, they can be repurposed and used in households. So I think that, the same principle can apply. There's always going to be a commercial use or a use for some of that battery which is left. And we're, I think, better placed to harness that than the household.
It looks like there's a whole ecosystem developing.
Yeah, there is. I mean, it's a very important point, and it's something that we're working on, and we're working with companies and our funders, is what do you do with all of these things at the end of life? There's a huge industry that's growing globally, and we haven't globally reached the end of life of solar panels, batteries in any scale. So that is going to be a whole secondary industry, how we recycle, repurpose, dispose of responsibly all of this new kit that's going out into roofs around the world.
Andrew, we've explored a little bit the early days of television in South Africa, but are there other parallels with what you're seeing happening in the solar field in South Africa, in particular what Gosolr is up to?
Absolutely. So, subscription services are thriving globally. I think the South African household and households generally started with this ownership principle that you must own things to get the benefit of it. Where we actually, when you look into it, there's a lot of things that the household now subscribes for and gets the benefit. I think one analogy we use often is the fiber to the home industry. There, the problem was we need fast internet. And they needed their companies, like fiber companies, to build the infrastructure, last mile infrastructure to connect. The household doesn't need to own that, but it needs to get fast internet. That's the same as what we think we're doing here. Another one, which I think I'm a music fan, and I used to own all these movies and CDs. I don't know if you remember those towers of CDs. I still have mine. Used to have to buy music. Now you're paying 100 Rand a month to Spotify or Apple Music, and you've got all that access to all the music, and you buy Netflix and you've got access to all the movies. It's the same concept, really. Subscription services are here to stay, and I think they'll continue. I think households will start to consume more things via this. Cars, for instance. I think that's a global industry that's growing, subscription cars.
You need to be careful here, because the World Economic Forum said something similar. And that's been taken by its critics as saying you will own nothing and you will be happy. Not quite so. It's that you don't need to own the asset. You can rent it. You can use it. You can take cars as an example. I love that example, because my vehicle probably gets used 5% of its lifespan. But if it was shared with many other people and it was really a utility, it got me from point A to point B, well, then it might be used 50% of its time, etc. So there's a lot of misunderstanding here, and I guess old school thinkers say you've got to own it, but the efficiencies are not there.
Absolutely. Let companies aggregate the assets, manage the assets, and provide services so that you can, as a household or consumer, use them. There'll be some assets, I think, that you probably will always want to own, and maybe that's some of it's sentimental, some of it's security based. But I think certainly the new generations coming through, I think home ownership is down in the millennials and the Gen Zs. I think the guys are looking at it in terms of the sharing economy, Ubers, Airbnbs. It's a similar concept. Here we're keeping the asset on a roof, but you are sharing the generation of the power once we can sell it into the grid with everyone. So here I think it's a company that's consolidating a group of assets and providing services to the base. Yeah.
Are you seeing that younger people get this more from your own asset, from your own customer base?
We've got a pretty widespread, but it is definitely, I'd say the 30 to 55 demographic is definitely where we see most uptake. I think under 30, the home ownership isn't quite there yet. And then I think you're over 55. I think it takes some convincing, but I think we are starting to convince those households that you definitely don't need to own it, and you shouldn't own it as well if you over 50 anyway.
Isn't that an interesting shift in thoughts, in the way that people are looking at life generally? As you've mentioned, Airbnb. In the past, no, you went to a hotel or you owned a second holiday home. Now you realize you can get those benefits at a fraction of the cost, because you're just leveraging those assets better. Globally, they're being better, and I guess bringing it back to Gosolr, and really my one question I wanted to ask you as well was, are you seeing a cap on what you can supply? Is there any resistance to meeting this seemingly untapped demand?
Well, I think as I mentioned, I think the wave that just hit, I think, the industry from probably about January to May, and that was unprecedented. I don't think it was sustainable. We've definitely seen a slowdown there, and now it's very stable. And I think there's a lot of reasons that are driving that stability. I think there has been a better than expected load shedding outlook over winter, and I think load shedding, even though it's not why we primarily do what we do, load shedding is one of the things that one of the benefits you get from solar. It's not all of the benefits. It's definitely not the major benefits, but it definitely has a short-term impact on demand. I think we spoke about that on the last call. But the household is under pressure. So adding new expenses to the household, I think we've seen all the data coming out from all of the consumer brands and banks to show that the household is just overly indebted and really struggling with interest rate hikes and other things. So even though our product provides you with some saving, it's still a new cost that you're bringing onto the board. It's not a full substitute cost at this stage, and especially in winter when there's less sun. So I think the solar industry is going to be in for a nice summer. Summer's better for solar in any event. So we're looking forward to the sun coming out, and especially in the Western Cape, where I don't think it's been out there for a while. And I think that's where we'll expect to pick up in demand, and hopefully we've had a peak in the interest rate cycle, so that households can get a bit more disposable income into their pockets.
Andrew Middleton from Gosolr, and I'm Alec Hogg from biznews.com.